Introducing National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk programming that you can access 24/7. For the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk for America.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dr. Sem Yankees show, but it's the Dr. Sem Yankees, Blue Jays, and Books show today, as I will have a good friend of mine, Andrew Forbes, on as my special guest. But before we bring Andrew Forbes in here, let's remind everybody to make today a great day. Let's make every single day great. And how do you make each day great? You look for the good that is around you, and then you appreciate the good, and then perpetuate the good by spreading it forward. And if you can't find any good, and that sometimes happens, there's always good around, but if you can't find any, well, then create some. Do something nice for somebody else, and then there's good. And then that person can perpetuate the good. Remember, when we give love and kindness and understanding, it comes back to us in greater amounts than we ever gave. And just a quick note that this show is brought to you by Artemisia Publishing, a independent publisher located in New Mexico in the United States. A great independent publisher, a traditional publisher. They do it just like the big houses, except they're a smaller publishing house with a host of great books, including numerous books by me and a new book by me about the Yankees coming out in February 2026. That's right. You have to wait a whole year, but it's coming. It's coming. It's all ready to go. And they have so many books, and there's such a collection of great authors that the publishing date is a year from now. That says something about how great Artemisia Publishing is doing. So here he is for a return engagement, my friend Andrew Forbes. Andrew, how are you?
I'm good, Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Now, just a little background to everybody watching. Andrew was on about a year ago, maybe a little more than that. We talked about his latest book, which he actually has another one coming out that he's going to talk about in a moment. And I don't think we talked a whole lot about the first book, focused on at least the first chapter, a bunch of essays, but one about Ichiro. And I said to Andrew, this was a lot of fun. We had a great time doing this. We had a lot of things to talk about. And I said, I'll get you on again. And then life got in the way. And all of a sudden, it's 19,000 months later, and I'm finally able to bring Andrew back on. So, Andrew, I apologize for the long delay.
I'm just happy to be here, Paul.
You're great. So tell us about your new book.
The new book, which comes out April the 15th, is called Fieldwork on Baseball and Making a Living. Funny story about that is I am, of course, Canadian and based in Canada, and my publisher is Canadian. And the original subtitle was on baseball and labor, but it was determined by the sales reps that Americans are maybe not comfortable with our spelling of labor on the cover of a book about baseball. So we changed it to On Baseball and Making a Living. It's another collection of essays, but they all center around the theme of work and how we fit baseball and work alongside one another in our lives. And the kind of central peg that everything hangs off of is a pitcher by the name of Hubert Pruitt, who went by the nickname Shucks, who did a very good job actually of keeping the Yankees in check in 1922. He played for the St. Louis Browns. He was a lefty, but he had a very unique story. He had a kind of short-lived but spectacular superpower, which was an ability to strike out Babe Ruth quite reliably. And in 1922, I know we tend to think of the Browns as a bit of a laughing stock, but the Browns had an excellent team in 1922 and were in a dogfight with the Yankees for the American League pennant. and Pruitt was a big part of that. And he was quite a discovery. He kind of wandered his way into baseball. He was a med student. I don't want to spoil too much of the story because it is a big part of the book, but he had a unique employment path. And for him, baseball was not maybe the be all and end all the way it is for a lot of players.
Didn't he go on the circuit afterwards and do a lot of speaking about the fact that I think Babe Ruth was like 3 for 26 against him with 19 strikeouts? I'm making the numbers up, but something crazy like that.
Yeah, they were very impressive for 2 years anyway. He kind of owned the Babe. He had arm trouble. I know what you're saying. His name did come up a lot. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that he was based in St. Louis, and lived his life after baseball in St. Louis. And of course, the preeminent sports rag of most of the 20th century was the Sporting News, based in St. Louis. So in January and February, when there wasn't a lot of baseball news, you could pick up the phone as somebody who worked for the Sporting News and call up Hub and get a quote about the glory days when he struck out Babe Ruth. So I think
Nice.
it had a lot to do with his profile, but yeah. In fact, the only time they actually spoke face to face was at a luncheon very shortly before Babe died. And I read about this in the book, and Pruitt says to Babe, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have a career. And Babe says, if all pitchers were like you, I wouldn't have a career. So.
Oh, nice. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So when does that book? April 15th?
April 15th. Yeah. Field Work, it's called, on baseball and making a living.
That's awesome. And how many players do you talk about in your essays?
I mean, it ranges. It's I speak about a number of players. I speak about Albert Pujols. I speak about, gosh, off the top of my head, I can't think of them all. But it's also got essays about, volunteerism and coaching youth baseball, and a lot of writing about community. And so it really, it's kind of far ranging. But all these things kind of exist as spokes off of the hub of Hub, if you'll forgive the pun. But yeah. A little bit of writing about going to Blue Jays games, because of course that's the bulk of my experience. Hopping on the commuter train and going to games in Toronto from here. Yeah, so it's it ranges far afield, but it's all connected to the same sort of central theme.
Oh, it sounds excellent. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy. So tell us a little bit about your other two books, since we have you here. And again, I don't think we talked a whole lot about the Ichiro, the Ichiro book. So give us a little background on those two.
Okay, the first one was, so I had published, I also write fiction. That's kind of the second track of my career. I had published my first book was a collection of short fiction. But while putting that together, I was also doing some writing on the internet about baseball, about sports, but primarily baseball, because that's how my mind works. And at the launch party for the first fiction book, somebody jokingly said, in the presence of my publisher, you should put together those baseball columns into a book. And my publisher very quickly said, I'd like to try that. So that came about. That was a collection that was really, it didn't have a central theme so much as it was just kind of a love letter to baseball. That was called The Utility of Boredom, which is a title which has earned some tomatoes thrown my way, but I think real baseball fans also get it. And then a number of years later, one of the pieces in that book was about Ichiro, who had been my favorite player. I'm a Blue Jays fan, but Ichiro was, he was Ichiro. You guys had a chance to see him for a number of years. So I thought, having written that one piece, that I was done with Ichiro, but as his career unfolded and we got closer to his what was obviously going to be his retirement and stepping away from the field, I kind of couldn't put him down. I couldn't stop thinking about other things to say about him. So the second baseball book is called The Only Way is the Steady Way, which is a quote by Ichiro when he was giving the farewell press conference at that last game he played in Tokyo. Via a translator, somebody asked him about his longevity. I believe it was Japanese. It was questioned in Japanese, and in the course of his answer, he said, "The only way is the steady way." And when I heard that or read that, someone had posted a translation online, I knew, number one, that I had a title for a book, and number two, that I had to write the book. So that one is kind of about how our favorite players, in this case Ichiro, can kind of be used as a way to mark off the years of our lives. And there are essays that kind of go off from that central hub. But it all comes back in the end to Ichiro.
And then you have a fiction book, McCurdle's Arm. Yes.
Yes, that one is what I said I would never do, which is to cross the streams in a sense and write a fictional baseball book. But that one is about semi-professional baseball in Southern Ontario in the 1890s. And I've described it to people as kind of it's like a very gritty Western meets Casey at the Bat.
And you just write so well, and each of them, I encourage everyone to get a copy of them. How would I mean, obviously Amazon, but is there another way to pick up your books? Is there an easy way? Is there a website?
The fact of the matter is, anywhere that you get your books, you'll be able to get them. Whatever is the most convenient for you. If that is Amazon, if that is a local independent store, my publisher does. Both my publishers now, I've got a couple, do sell directly on their websites, but of course you'll be paying the extra cost, as the majority of your listeners, I think, are American, to bring them into the country. So anywhere you get your books, really. And from what I understand, there are questions about how much things from Canada will cost in the very near future. But from what I understand, at least the first shipment of books of the new one, Fieldwork, will be getting in under the wire across the border and be sitting in warehouses and waiting to go. So you shouldn't pay any extra money on top of that if you wanted to pick a copy of that up.
All right, so there won't be a book.
The short answer,
book tariff.
Not on that one yet. No. So the short answer, and this is what I always say, is the best place to get the book is wherever it's most convenient or wherever you prefer to get books.
And I encourage everyone, type in Andrew Forbes into Amazon. You'll see these books, and you just can't go wrong. They're fun. They're enlightening. Andrew's a great writer. He pulls you right in. And again, I'm looking forward to the new one. I can't wait. April 15th. That'll be super.
April 15th. Yeah.
Well, April 15th is right around opening day, a couple weeks after, I guess. But you're a Blue Jays fan, and, obviously we're Yankee fans here. But I think, we're different Yankee fans. But it's not like Yankees are the best and everybody else stinks and that kind of stuff. So last year didn't go so well for Toronto. I don't want to bring up bad memories or any of that, but It was a 74-88 fifth place finish in the AL East. So as you look towards opening day, what are you thinking?
I will say, I think that my head is in the same place that the vast majority of Blue Jays fans' heads are right now. And that's even before opening day. We just want to see Vladimir Guerrero Jr. extended. And the feeling is, if that happens, everything else will fall into place. There's a great deal of anxiety in Blue Jay land about what's going to happen with Vlad, because, you guys know how good he is. But he's also been a part of the organization for so long. We waited with such anticipation as he made his way up through the minors. And there's an emotional connection too to the fact that his dad played in Montreal. And we've all seen the pictures of a very young Vlad Guerrero accompanying his dad, standing on the field at Olympic Stadium in Montreal in a little Expos uniform. So what we perceive as a great injustice would be Vlad going elsewhere. So the sense here is that, of course, the Blue Jays are owned by a corporation, Rogers Corporation, which is telecommunications. The sense here is that everyone just wants them to throw whatever money it'll take to get Vlad locked up, because it's not our money. I mean, it might raise our cell phone bills. I don't know, but we just want to see that done. So if that happens, and the unofficial deadline is the beginning of formal training camp, which is just days away, the 18th I think is the date that they've quoted. Vlad's camp has said if nothing happens by then, he's not going to talk during the season. Whether that's firm or not, I don't know, but we wake up and check our phones to see if anything is developed with that. Otherwise, it'll be exciting to see if Max Scherzer's got anything left in the tank. It will be interesting to see how this. I think my question, other than the Vlad thing, is what is this team's identity going to be? Because for a number of years now, they've been a premier defensive team whose bats aren't quite there, with the exception of a couple of players. And now we seem to be kind of, our apparent pursuits over the winter of Alonso and Bregman and Soto, even for that matter, had us looking like we were going to kind of abandon that identity a little bit and just be big boppers again. A lot of Toronto teams in the past were big slugging teams. But instead we went and we got Jimenez from the Guardians, who's a all glove no bat guy. Then we pulled off a perhaps inadvisable trade with the Guardians again for Miles Straw, hoping that extra cap space that gave us, international bonus pool space, would give us a shot at Roki, which didn't happen. And now we're stuck with another all glove no bat guy, who's probably a fourth or fifth outfielder, maybe. I don't know. So I'd like early on to see exactly what this team is, and what the games look like, because right now it looks like kind of a split personality.
And right, it's tough when you are looking at a season ahead of you, and there's not a lot to look forward to, and that would be true if Vlad goes away. Of course, your evil neighbor to the south in New York City is salivating at the idea that in 4 days the Blue Jays don't extend Vlad Guerrero Jr. And he says, I'm not going to negotiate and I'm leaving you guys at the end of the year, which would prompt them to then trade him. So I thought it might be kind of fun. Is you are now the general manager of the Toronto Blue Jays, and it's now the 20th. And Vlad, you met with him quietly and he said, I'm gone. You didn't give me the extension I wanted. And you found out, you talked to the Rogers family. They told you, we can't pay this guy. And so, you got to trade him or else you're going to get nothing. So I'm now, you didn't know this, but they just appointed me the GM of the Yankees. and so I thought it might be kind of fun to see if you and I can't come to a trade. What would it take for me to give you so that I could have Vlad play first base for me?
Let's first of all remember that Vlad is on the record as saying he would never be a Yankee.
That is correct. That he hates the Yankees, or at least he did. I think he backtracked from that a little bit last year. Because
I think his people said, "Hold on, Vlad." Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not a good negotiating position to say I won't be a Yankee. You want the Yankees to help
burn
drive
any
up your
bridges.
salary. Yes.
I have to be honest. If Vlad is out, we are rebuilding. So I can't take anybody who's a star at the major league level right now. I need prospects. I need a boatload of prospects. I feel terrible even contemplating this, Paul. I don't like this conversation. So who do you have at the single A, double A level who's going to set the world on fire in 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, and that's always the problem, right? And so the Yankees have Yankee fans come in one of two groups. Like there's Yankee fans that want to believe that every single prospect the Yankees have is a future superstar. Maybe every team's like that. I really obviously focus on the Yankees, but every single guy in the system is going to be a superstar. And there are a couple of good young Yankees. Austin Wells is good. Luis Gil just won the Rookie of the Year. Everybody's high on Jason Dominguez. Anthony Volpe's doesn't really hit, but he's a great defensive shortstop, and we hope he starts to hit. So there's some young talent at the major leagues, but the recent MLB pipeline listing of all the top prospects, the only guy that made it from the Yankees is Jason Dominguez out of the top 100. So I think, Andrew, what you're telling me is I don't have enough to offer you for Vlad Guerrero.
I don't think you do, no. And I think there would need to be honestly, for Blue Jays to keep any kind of goodwill among their public, there would need to be sort of a premium on top of whatever Vlad was worth, just to sort of salve the emotional sting, because it really would be traumatic for most Blue Jays fans. It's probably the same when the Blue Jays visit Yankee Stadium, but at a Blue Jays game, 75% of the jerseys people are wearing are Vlad. Like, he is the guy. He is the franchise. And it's not as though you're trading somebody at the end of, this isn't like a Paul Goldschmidt. This is a guy in the middle of his prime, right? Isn't he younger than the Rookie of the Year? Like, he really is, barring catastrophic injury, he is somebody who can help a team win ball games for the next 10 years. So it would be
Yeah,
difficult.
the crazy thing, you're right. He is 25. He's going to turn 26 in March.
Yeah. Yeah. He's,
I mean, it feels like he's been around for 100 years, but he's 26. Right. He's like Juan Soto.
Yeah. That's it. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, it would, I don't know. It would have to be an historic deal, I think.
What if I give you the entire Trenton team or the entire Wilkes-Barre Scranton team? I'll give you the entire roster. We'll give you our entire AAA club.
I mean, then we'd need to find space for all those guys. But as you say, I mean, the Blue Jays are not much better. I think we had 2 prospects in the top 100. So, if anybody's going to get traded away, if anybody of value is going to get traded away from Toronto, they have to be thinking really high prospects at this point.
The Yankees have a few, obviously, but again, while some fans will say, there's this guy, Spencer Jones, he's big, tall, bashing home run guy who plays in the outfield, and like he's the next Aaron Judge, but hasn't gotten out of AA ball yet. And he's probably Vlad Guerrero's age or a year or two younger. It's not like he's 18, he's in his 20s, and he struck out, I don't know, about 45,000 times last year. He might become great, but you're still in AA. It's your prospects are starting to dim.
Spend any amount of time as a baseball fan, and you get to recognize that that the percentage of can't miss prospects that miss is pretty high, right?
Yes, 100%. There's a book called The Next Mickey Mantle that I think it was Barry Sparks wrote it, and it's great because it talks about all these guys that were unbelievable, that were going to be great, and it just didn't work out because life is tough and baseball is tough, and
that's it.
While it looks like you might become great, you might not. The half hour goes by far too quickly. We were talking before about so many things that we were going to discuss, and one of them was the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. And I was going to go through and name a bunch of guys that are in there that were Yankees. The guy who replaced Babe Ruth, George Selkirk, who was a better player than anybody remembers or knows. He actually was born in Canada. He's in the Canadian Hall of Fame. But I really want to go off Yankee talk and talk about a guy who is in the Canadian Hall of Fame who really probably belongs in the Baseball Hall of Fame, who nobody mentions. And so I'd love for you to talk a little about Dave Stieb.
Dave Stieb occupies such a cherished spot in the hearts of longtime Blue Jays fans for the reason that you cite there, that he was really one of the best, sort of definitely a top 5 pitcher of the 1980s across baseball. And better, I mean, both you and I both came up with the name Jack Morris, somebody who probably didn't have quite as good a career as Dave Stieb, but is still in the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. I think Dave Stieb played, his career happened before our current kind of media ecosystem, right? So you really could get lost. You really were in the hinterlands if you played for the Blue Jays in the 1980s, pitching at Exhibition Stadium with the snow falling, before the Rogers Center the Sky Dome was even built. Dave Stieb was somebody who was so reliable and so integral to those Blue Jays teams, starting when they weren't very good in the early 80s until they were contenders in the mid and late 80s. That 85 team, I will not forget the loss to Kansas City. George Brett. But yeah, Dave Stieb is somebody who's, if you look at his numbers, really does, especially his advanced metrics, I think he really is somebody who probably deserves another look for Cooperstown, given the other starting pitchers who've been admitted in the last number of years.
You look at Dave Stieb, and I think a lot of people don't realize how good he was in his prime. In 1982, he led the American League pitchers, maybe the whole league, in WAR. In 1983, he led the league in WAR, and in 1984, he led the league in WAR. He was a 7+ WAR pitcher 3 years in a row. He threw 288 innings in 82. He threw 278 innings in 83. He threw 267 innings in 84. Now his career, he had a little bit of a down point, but then he comes back in the late 80s. Listen to these records: 17-14, 17-12, 16-8. Couple down years: 14-13, 7-12. Then he's 13-9, 16-8, 17-8, 18-6. It's very impressive. And if people want to look at WAR, Dave Stieb's lifetime WAR 56.4. Jack Morris's lifetime WAR 43.5. I mean, that's a Grand Canyon apart, right?
It is, but I think Jack Morris probably gets a lot of mileage out of that Game 7 complete game 10 inning. He played in a number of big, including for the Blue Jays. He played in a number of big games that just had enough profile to raise his stock. And Dave Stieb didn't get those games, right? By the time the Blue Jays were in the World Series, his career was on the downslide, right? But yeah, it's hard to argue. It's hard to imagine if he were playing now, and his absolutely devastating slider. Call up video of his slider. It's a pretty devastating pitch, and that's what hitters said. Anybody who faced him, it would be all over TikTok. It would be like there would be highlight. The pitching ninja would have overlays of his fastball and his curveball and his slider, and he would be known a lot better than he was. He is
I know,
sort of a quiet superstar.
Yeah, I know when he pitched against the Yankees couldn't win. And there's an interesting story in the book I wrote with Roy White, where Roy White was a Yankee through 1979. He went to Japan, played 3 years in Japan, had a lot of success there, came back. And when he came back, he was a coach for the Yankees. And he wasn't that old yet. And there were some guys on the team like Lou Piniella who were his age. And he said something like to Billy Martin, like, hey, maybe I could still play. And Billy's like, you're a coach. And, and he would, the first year, I think he was coaching first base, and he was thinking like, well, I could do that. I could do that. I could do that. And then he tells the story of the Yankees were facing the Blue Jays, and Dave Winfield was up, and Dave Stieb was pitching. And that was when it hit him. He goes, I am so glad I do not have to hit against this guy, because I don't think I could.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I don't know what the next committee Stieb would qualify for in terms of election to Cooperstown, but I hope that they give him a good second look.
Yeah, I think he deserves it. And a lot of Yankee fans, I would love to see Don Mattingly in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. He comes up short in so many ways, but he had a really high peak roughly at that same time that Dave Stieb did. And
best hitter in baseball, right? Yeah.
Yeah, best, but Stieb was the best pitcher, or at least one of them. He just has these incredible numbers. He pitched complete games. Did he ever? And I don't know the answer to this. Did he ever throw a no-hitter? I think he did at the very end, right?
At Cleveland, against Cleveland. After I can't remember how many one-hitters, and they always seem to be broken up very late, ninth inning. But he did finally get his no-hitter against Cleveland, and it's one of those, it's one of those really, really, really important moments in Blue Jays history, because we had grown so attached to him, and it seemed to mirror, the Blue Jays, the awareness of the Blue Jays as a team outside of Canada was almost not quite, they don't seem like they're quite a major league team. They're not quite good enough. And Stieb, as somebody who kind of almost with shocking regularity would lose no-hitters late, seemed like an embodiment of that. And then when he finally broke through, it was a very cathartic moment for Blue Jays fans.
That's awesome. Andrew, unfortunately, we're at the break here, 29 minutes and 38 seconds. So I'm going to have to wrap it up and say thank you to you for doing the podcast, and we have to do this again and talk more baseball together, because it's always fun, and you're such a great person, such a great writer, and so engaging to talk to. It makes the 30 minutes go far too quickly. Everybody, thank you for watching the Dr. Sem Yankees Books and Blue Jays show today. Have yourselves a great day.